The first 10 races in low fuel motorsport can be a real roller coaster for a new sim racer, a real graduation to the LFM community. And I have just finished those 10 races, losing my rookie tag and showing off my driver rating to the world. But how did it all go? Well, in this video, I am going to give you a recap of those first 10 races on LFM, share with you all the highs and lows, the triumphs and mistakes, and reveal to you what happened to both my ELO driver rating and my safety rating through those 10 races. So strap in, follow along, and as always, I'd love to hear your honest feedback about my performance in the comments below. Now, I have the first 3 races already live on my channel, and they are worth a watch. But to catch up, race number 1 was a real classic first corner chaos moment, which then got undone by a terrible fuel mistake which cost me my first race podium. Race number 2 started with an internet disconnect in qualifying and an unexpected last to first challenge, which resulted in a P7 for me in a pretty decent race. And race number 3 was a thriller in the rain, avoiding the chaos and coming away with my first LFM podium despite having never raced a single lap in the rain in the game before. However, the roller coaster did not stop there as we now dive into race number 4.
Dry conditions now for race number 4, and we're starting out in position 8. Now on the inside as we're coming up to turn 1. Now I don't want to be involved in any issues here, so I try and brake early, but I completely misjudge it. Coming right up the inside of this green Ferrari, it's completely unintentional, and fortunately it does not cause a really big crash with other racers there. Losing a couple of positions as we now make our way up to turn 3. Not wanting to make the same mistake again, I try and take the inside line once more, braking a bit earlier, being a bit more cautious. A couple of cars going off on the outside there. I managed to come underneath this Porsche in front of me, and fortunately a success the second time round. Coming down to turn 4 now, I've got a car on my outside once more, so it's a repeat of the previous 2 corners. Braking early, making that inside apex nice and tight, and we come through, moving up to P7. And finally on this first lap, we're going to show here turns 5 and 6. The red and green Ferrari, they make slight contact. I get underneath the green Ferrari, almost getting underneath the red Ferrari as well. But we pull back into line here, and that is really the action of lap 1. Lap 2 at turn 3, black and gold Ferrari, he sails on by us through the braking zone there. Fortunate not to get involved in that one. And here on lap number 5, he's caught us again and up the inside. Gonna let him pass on this one. He's certainly a faster car. Caught us in a few laps there, obviously. But I try and brake early to make the apex, get underneath and see if we can't maybe fight this one a little bit. But I get collected in the braking zone at the very last moment. Turns me around and unfortunately losing a few positions there. Back down to P12. But we make our way back to what is P11. That turns into P10 after a car in front of us has a moment somewhere, which I don't see in any of the footage. And we have a bit of a battle here. I'm definitely a little bit faster, but unfortunately I cannot get by what is a different black and gold Ferrari. See, having a pretty good little battle here through turns 5 and 6, but unfortunately there's no possibility of a move. A bit of a throw into the final corner, and we just finished line astern in what is P10 over the line, but turns into P9 after some post-race penalties. Race number 5 now, and we have cooler evening conditions for this one. The track was fast, but I didn't necessarily recognise it during qualifying, so I was setting what were some of my fastest laps around the Red Bull Ring at this point, and here you can see P3, and unfortunately those times got completely swallowed up by my competitors. And as we can see, even though at this point this is the fastest lap I've ever set around the Red Bull Ring, I get a lowly P16, 0.655 away from pole. So a competitive race with some very close times. Into the race now, I am in on the inside once more, and I don't want to be repeating the same mistakes I made in the previous race. I cover the inside line a little harder, try and brake a little bit earlier. It's still not quite early enough. This Lamborghini in front, he gets a small touch, but once again, it does not cause a mass accident. So I've gotten away with that one for the second race in a row. Moving up to turn number 3 now. Once again, I'm thinking about taking the inside line. I feel like there's a bit of a gap around us here, but I sort of make this awkward little inside move here. This car behind looked like it was going to do a silly dive. It was a bit clumsy by me. We make a little bit of contact in the braking zone, and mentally I sort of kicked myself for that one. But it all unfolds for me in the end of lap number 1. We come down into this complex. You see this red and silver Ferrari on the outside, and he gets a little bit loose on exit. My initial thought was to get hard down the inside to try and make a pass, but he comes across my line. I should have been far more patient in that moment. And then we have this moment. This black and silver Ferrari, he's been involved in an issue on the other side of the track. And as he's come back on, he's had no steering. And we just find ourselves collecting each other in the barrier there. And unfortunately, I need to come in. The front damage is so big that when I jump on the brakes, the headlights are flickering and not ideal for a night race. So this one unraveled really, really quickly for me. That's what happens starting P16. It's a really tricky one in rookies. You almost want to start off the back of that point, but I really did think that I was going to be qualifying a lot better than that. Coming out of the pits to this incident in front of us, getting around this BMW here, and we are certainly more than a lap down and trailing around here behind what is the 14th place driver on the road. And it's a pretty boring race from here. I'm not able to make any more positions. The car in front is slower than me, but I'm not able to pass him. I don't want to be involved in anyone else's race at this point. And ultimately just coming away with that pretty lowly position and a pretty rough way to finish up this particular race. Race number 6 now, and one final race at the Red Bull Ring. I'd certainly been enjoying the races at this track, and it was a nice quiet week for me with the family, so I was able to do quite a bit of racing here. Coming across the line to set my fastest ever lap time around the Red Bull Ring, a 28.9. Starting out in P8 for this one, a familiar position on the inside coming into turn 1. Can we not make an error into turn 1? I almost collect the back of this McLaren here. He was nice and slow through that turn, but fortunately no contact. A real miracle for myself in that particular situation. And it's a similar story once again up to turn 3. We've done this many times. So we brake early, tight apex. No one's collecting us here, which is great. And coming out here in P10, making our way down to turn number 4. Now this McLaren, he's on the outside here. I'm going to pull off my inside maneuver pass. He moves across really aggressively, trying to block that, but we still managed. The orange McLaren, he goes off into the infield. So we're up to P9. But this McLaren, he's still on my outside, now inside. And ultimately he gets through in the turn 5-6 complex here. So we fall into a nice line, and that more or less is how it rolls for a few laps. But lap number 6, coming up into turn 3, I've got this black Ferrari. He goes a bit long, trying to come around my outside, and we push down now to turn 4. He's rejoined the track quite aggressively, so he's still next to me. I'm just going to try and move across a little bit here, just to open up my corner a little bit, but this other black Ferrari, he dives down the inside quite aggressively, so I back out of it, let these guys do their thing here. I've had a few rough races recently and I was really keen to try have a very clean one and not be involved in any issues. But as we come down turn 5-6, they are still side by side. They've both given themselves awkward lines. I've obviously got a more ideal line. I'm not really sure where or how to get involved in this one, and ultimately I just don't want to be involved. And as we come down here into the final turn, I'm not really sure where to approach this one, and I lose the rear end. It's a little throttle, little brake. It's just an awkward corner for me. Completely lose the rear. That Porsche behind, he definitely does not touch me. I do that all by myself, and I'm really, unfortunately, find myself going down the order to P17, kicking myself for that one. And that really puts me in the thick of it. You see this BMW, this Ferrari, they collect. He comes back across the track, almost get taken out. I'm trying really hard to avoid everyone. We clear a couple of them, and ultimately, with 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go, I find myself behind this red and silver Ferrari, which is the Ferrari that I came into contact with in the very last turn of the night race. So I'm very keen at this moment of time to have a nice clean encounter with this driver so that he feels that he can trust me maybe the next time he sees my name in a race like this. And it is a clean battle, but unfortunately I don't get any opportunities to try a nice clean pass. And we come across the line, a P13 there, a pretty rough way to finish at Red Bull Ring, but not a terrible race for me, just that one little mistake. And now time for race 7 at Spa. And you can see here I'm looking backwards because at this point there is no one in front of me. This Mustang on the side, he was the pole sitter. I'm in P2 and he's out of his starting box for this one. I get the cleanest run of all time up El Rouge to start this race. And it's a very good race for me, this race at Spa. Now Spa is my favourite track in the game. Now that we live in Belgium, this is my local. I've been here in real life. It's an amazing circuit. It's the track that I have spent probably the most time driving, and it's the track I really want to get right in this game because of the reason of being by it. So as we see the start here, we're coming up the hill, nice and clear track, phenomenal scenes for me considering some of the races I've had. Now this was a really tricky week for me in terms of getting lots of racing in, and it was a real shame that I couldn't really knuckle down and do this race a number of times and sort of clear rookie class in this week. Unfortunately, it was just the one race that I was able to jump into. This is a split 3 race, but my times are good, they're competitive, and even in higher splits I feel like I would have been able to compete. Obviously in rookie, it's a safety rating is what recognises the splits, so it's not that this is a slower split versus others. You see here, as this is about lap number 5, the Mustang, he does close up eventually. He comes through as we make our way up to Blanchimont, and this is really the only time I get anywhere near a car in this race. The McLaren behind, he's a bit quicker in sector 1. It's probably a setup thing for me, running higher wing, him running a lower wing. But through the middle of the track, I do pull away every lap. So he doesn't really get close enough to be any real issue for me. And we can bring it home. It's a super clean and consistent race. No major mistakes, no major off tracks. And coming through the chicane for the final time, to come and claim a very tidy, very clean, on pure pace P2 position. And that then brings us to race number 8. Week 10 of season 15 of LFM brought 2 options, Monza and Paul Ricard. Now Monza is the endurance race, and both tracks I am not familiar with. However, I did have a better concept and understanding of Monza, but turn number 1 is notorious for first turn pile-ups, and in a rookie race it was going to be a bit of a risk to take on this particular corner. I just want to get through here cleanly, and as we come down to that for the first time, it's looking all steady until this moment here. This orange BMW, he gets turned around. I'm getting bumps from pretty much all corners, pretty light touching if I'm being honest. It's not major, and I feel like we get through there kind of okay for a first opportunity without really sustaining any big damage. Now as we come down into turns 3 and 4, these 2 red cars get into a bit of a tangle. I thread the needle on this one, coming up to take up a few positions, and the first few laps here at Monza do go really well. Now I was finding my lap times were pretty decent for someone who hasn't done a lot of driving at Monza, and I was able to drive at sort of like the 103% times when I'm in clear track with a good car. But Monza seems to be a place for the specialists, and the story of this race was that more or less I was just continually caught and passed by a number of drivers. So my tactic was really just to stay clean. You see here coming out of Ascari, the pink McLaren and red Ferrari, they collect each other after the red Ferrari spins out the exit. And avoiding things like this was really the only way I was going to produce a result from this race. P5 as we're coming into the pit lane. The white Ferrari, he pulls up really early for the pit stop. I have practiced this pit entry and I do collect them unfortunately in the pit entry. And then I produce probably the worst pit box entry of all time. I haven't really been practicing this, and this white Ferrari you see here as he pulls in, he is going to be stopping in front of me. I lose the vision as I go through and I sail past the pit box significantly. Got a face full of the stop sign there, and I don't recognize that I'm too far past the box for it to automatically drag me back and start the pit procedure. Finally recognizes I'm in the box. I've lost a good 15 seconds to this. So I really need to practice that and get that right for another time. It absolutely destroyed any opportunity of a result for me. Like I said, there are cars here that are much faster than me, and being consistent and not making mistakes was the only way I was going to produce a good result. And now later in the race, I get this really sloppy moment as we come into Parabolica. A really silly little half spin. I find the wall, and it was probably just a bit of tiredness. This is obviously the longest race I've ever done in ACC, and with the pace of the race, I was having to be on it quite a bit to try and make time. The Parabolica was a tricky turn for me throughout this whole race. So we come across the line here. It's a P14, P15 position, something like that. It doesn't really matter. It wasn't that good. It was a pretty rough race for me, but we got through it. And being a sucker for punishment, I decided the next night to jump into one more race here at Monza. We're going to show a bit of the qualifying here because I had been doing some practice. I was really keen to try and work out where I was losing most of the time. I was playing around with some little bit of setup differences as well, because I was certainly struggling to get out of the Parabolica, and being overtaken into turn 1 was a regular occurrence. So we worked on that a little bit. As we get into qualifying here, I really start to put a lap together, and as we come through the Parabolica, finding some time here as well, and this lap is going to be the fastest lap I have done in Monza to this point, getting into the 1 minute and 48 second mark with a 48.7. A bit of a relief more than a fist bump moment for me just to get into that time. But it's good enough only for P11. I'm on the inside going into turn 1. And certainly I'm a bit more nervous in this position for this turn 1. So green light and down we go. Trying to think about being more on the inside. I don't want to let a car come up the middle though, which is what happens 3 wide for us as we enter the turn. It's all very gentlemanly, but the Ford in front, he just stops because of an incident in front of him, and there is just that concertina effect behind. Collected everywhere on this one. Find myself in that outside gravel. We show it here on the overhead replay. Look, no touches to this point, but the Ford, he completely stops. I touch, the Ferrari touches me, another Ferrari touches him behind, spinning in front, Audi on the inside in the second part of the chicane. Chaos, pure chaos, very typical turn 1 at Monza. And yes, far more damaged car out of turn 1 on this one than it was in the previous race. Got this Bentley, he's coming back around the outside, and then I make this silly mistake. I've pushed the wrong wheel setting. I'm trying to look at what damage I have. I turn my heads up display off. I miss my braking point slightly into the second chicane. The Bentley has to take an evasive line. He gets out in front of me though, so that's all clean. Just a bit of a rookie error there with the settings on the buttons. Sort of flying blind here. Not that you need the heads up display, the dash is still there of course. And that is a chaotic first lap. Now coming into lap number 3, the first chicane, I'm getting attacked from behind. The damage is definitely slowing me down the straights, so I'm a bit of a sitting duck at every opportunity in these high speed straights. And this is really where this race kind of leads to. I'm just trying to get through now to a pit window to try and get this damage fixed. I cannot come in super early because I will destroy the tyres over the stint. I'm not at that level to be gentle with them and produce speed. So I just continually drop down the order, just trying to be consistent, but you see I'm only producing 1 minute 50 second lap times, which is seconds away from any sort of optimum pace, and a real shame actually that the way this one started out. But that was the risk that I had at Monza. However, 27 minutes and 37 seconds to go, all of my competitors disappear, and I'm left with being Nigel No Mates, internet disconnect for me, and I have been put out of my misery for this one. A DNF P21, a real disappointing way to end race number 9.
And lastly, we have race number 10. Now I needed a really good result to break even on my ELO rating in this 10th race. Sadly, however, we had a trifecta of issues in this race, starting with this moment here, and it killed my chances of a good result in this particular race. Now this race is also well documented in the start of this video here, and fortunately we get some better results after that one. However, a P22 result was a rough way to conclude my graduation races, and we'll now dive in to see how the ELO and how the safety rating progressed through those first 10. After an evenly up and down stint at the Red Bull Ring and a very nice P2 finish at Spa, we had managed to gain ELO for the first 6 races, getting up to 1532. However, the next 2 races at Monza and the shocker race at Donington Park really cut any hopes of a dream start to my ELO rating, and we ultimately finished up with an ELO of 1325, which still maintains us a bronze level driver rating. As for safety rating, despite some of the collisions that I only had 2 races where I managed to drop safety rating. My unintentional last to first challenge in race number 2 resulted in quite a few small touches with other cars as I made my way through the field, and resulted in a 0.05 safety rating drop. And the trifecta of issues that I had at Donington Park, which included misjudging the pit entry and speeding in the pit lane, also resulted in a 0.07 safety rating drop. But not making any big mistakes with other drivers and driving clean when I was able to did allow me to take my safety rating from 2.5 at its starting point and get it up to 3.81 inside those 10 races. So despite the ups and downs of the ELO, a nice upwards trajectory of the safety rating is something that I am pretty proud of in these first ones, and it's definitely the trend that I'd like to see as we continue forward with LFM racing now. So let me encourage you that you do not need to be the absolute best out of the gate in LFM. The ups and downs are normal, whether it's through your doing or not. Stay positive through the process and stay patient when things are not going your way. I certainly know now more than ever that I have a lot still to learn inside ACC and LFM. So there is the recap, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and please let me know how I did, or even better, let me know what your stats were after your first 10 races in LFM. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing some of the stories that you have from your rookie graduation. And I have plenty more to break down from these races, so if you want to see the video where I break down all the mistakes that I made and how I would correct them in the future, then please subscribe, because that video is going to be coming out real soon. Race hard, stay positive. I'm really looking forward to bringing you the next races I have in LFM, and we'll catch you all in those videos. Cheers.